The universe is not silent because it is empty. It is silent because it is waiting. To the human ear, space is a vacuum, a place where sound waves have no medium to travel, no air to carry a scream or a song or a warning. But to the senses and the great metal ears we point toward the sky, the universe is usually a noisy place. It crackles with the radio waves of dying stars. It hums with the background radiation left over from the beginning of time. It is a chaotic orchestra of energy that never sleeps. But then there are moments when the noise stops making sense, or rather, when a new kind of heavy silence layers itself over the chaos. It began in the middle of July in the year 2025. The summer on Earth was hot, blistering with heat waves that shimmered off the asphalt of great cities like New York, London, and Tokyo. People were looking down, wiping sweat from their foreheads, worried about the rising temperatures of the oceans or the soaring cost of living. They worried about rent and the price of gasoline. Few were looking up, and those who were looking up were told very specifically to look away. The object came from the deep dark, arriving from the direction of the constellation Lyra, the harp of the heavens. It pierced through the Oort cloud, the massive icy shell that surrounds our solar system like a needle moving through smoke. It did not tumble like a rock. It did not spin wildly like a generic asteroid lost in the void. It moved with a terrifying mechanical stability. Astronomers classify interstellar objects, things that come from outside our own solar system, with a specific label. The first visitor was called Oumuamua. The second was Borisov. This was the third. In the secret logs of high-altitude observatories, it was catalogued as 3I Atlas. The 3I stood for the third interstellar visitor. Atlas was the name given by the few trembling scientists who saw it, first named after the Titan, who held up the sky because the sheer weight of its existence threatened to crush everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. 3I Atlas was not bright. In fact, it was the absolute opposite of bright. It was a hole in the fabric of the night. It absorbed 99% of the light that hit it. It was a matte black sliver, long and thin like a cigar, roughly 500 meters in length. To a standard telescope, it was invisible. It was only detectable by what it blocked out. It was a moving shadow blotting out the stars behind it as it rushed forward. By all the known laws of physics, the arrival of an object like this should have been the loudest event in human history. Not loud in decibels, but loud in impact. It was travelling at 80 kilometers per second, a speed that proved it was not bound by the gravity of our sun. It was just passing through. But as it crossed the orbit of Jupiter, the giant gas planet, it did something that rocks simply do not do. It corrected its course. The adjustment was tiny, a shift of less than 1 degree. But in the language of mathematics, that 1 degree was a shout. Nature is random. Nature is chaotic. Asteroids tumble and drift. Nature does not correct its path to swing closer to the third planet from the sun. Nature does not hit the brakes. And this is where the true silence began. Not the silence of the void, but the silence of the ground. In a normal world, a discovery of this magnitude would trigger a global frenzy. Every telescope from the Atacama Desert in Chile to the frozen peaks of Hawaii would point toward it. The front pages of every newspaper would display grainy images of the intruder. Social media would burn with theories, fear and excitement. We would argue about whether they were friendly or hostile. We would panic. We would pray. But in July 2025, the world remained deaf. If you opened the New York Times on the morning of July 20th, the day Atlas crossed the orbit of Mars, you would have seen headlines about a complex political scandal in the Senate regarding infrastructure spending. You would have read a thoughtful opinion piece about the future of electric cars and battery regulations. You would have seen a vibrant recipe for a summer peach salad with burrata cheese. There was absolutely no mention of the 500-meter shadow rushing toward Earth at impossible speeds. The editors had scrubbed the sky clean. If you turned on CNN, you saw the usual cycle of pundits arguing about tax rates and border controls. The breaking news banners flashed red at the bottom of the screen, demanding attention for trivialities while the real news hung above their heads unnoticed. They talked about a celebrity divorce. They talked about a heatwave in Texas. They filled the air with noise to ensure no one heard the silence. The Washington Post, famous for its slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness," was participating in the greatest blackout of all. The editorial boards knew. The science desks knew. The information was there, sitting in the encrypted inboxes of senior editors, marked with high-priority flags from sources at NASA and the European Space Agency. But the order had come down from somewhere high above the editorial rooms, from the owners and the shareholders and the shadowy government liaisons: do not cause panic. Do not look up. Maintain the status quo. It was a calculated apathy. It was an engineered silence. The data regarding 3I Atlas was not lost. It was filtered. The images captured by the James Webb Space Telescope were not deleted. They were classified top secret. The narrative was controlled with surgical precision. The powers that be decided that humanity was not ready to know that it was not alone. Or perhaps more cynically, they wanted to figure out how to profit from the visitor before the rest of the world knew it even existed. There were leaks, of course. The internet is a sieve that cannot hold water perfectly. On obscure forums and deep web message boards, amateur astronomers screamed into the digital void. They posted coordinates. They posted blurry photos taken from backyard telescopes in rural Australia and the deserts of Arizona. Look at the vector, one user wrote in a frantic post. It slowed down. Why did it slow down? Rocks don't use brakes. It is not a comet. There is no tail. There is no gas venting, another replied. It is artificial. But these voices were drowned out by the massive noise of the algorithm. Their posts were downranked. Their accounts were suspended for spreading misinformation or conspiracy theories. The trending topics were filled with viral dance videos and arguments about sports. The signal was buried deep under the noise. The contrast was haunting. Up there in the cold vacuum, an object of immense significance was gliding silently through the dark, past the asteroid belt, weaving through the debris without a scratch. Turned its sensors, if it had sensors, toward the blue marble of Earth. It watched us. Down here, we argued about the price of coffee. We worried about our likes on Instagram. We lived in a bubble of ignorance, protected by a media machine that had decided for us that ignorance was bliss. As July turned to August 3, Atlas reached its closest approach to Earth. It did not enter our atmosphere. It did not land on the White House lawn to demand a meeting. It simply slid by a ghost in the night, passing within 2 lunar distances of our planet. That is close, terrifyingly close in cosmic terms. It was close enough that if it had been white, it would have shone as bright as the North Star. But because it was black, painted in the colour of the void, it remained a secret to the naked eye. The gravity of Earth tugged at it, and it tugged back. The tides were slightly higher that week, confusing fishermen. The radio static on certain frequencies became erratic, disrupting GPS signals for a few minutes. Dogs barked at the empty sky in the middle of the night, sensing something that humans could not see. Sensitive equipment in physics labs registered gravitational anomalies that made no sense, causing scientists to scratch their heads and check their machines for errors. The scientists who were allowed to watch it saw the truth. They saw that as Atlas passed Earth, it rotated. It turned its broadside toward the planet like a giant scanner reading a barcode. It lingered for just a moment longer than gravity should have allowed, effectively hitting the brakes to get a better look at the civilization teeming on the surface. It was studying the radio waves, the carbon emissions, the city lights, and then, with a burst of speed that defied the laws of inertia, it accelerated. It used Earth's gravity not just as a slingshot, but as a pivot point. It shot away, heading back out toward the darkness, toward the constellation of Sagittarius. The mainstream media remained comatose. The New York Times ran a Sunday special on the history of jazz music in New Orleans. The Washington Post discussed the polling numbers for the upcoming midterm elections. The silence was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. But the silence of the stars is different from the silence of men. The stars are silent because they are patient. Men are silent because they are afraid. 3i Atlas was gone as quickly as it had arrived, disappearing back into the ink-black sea of space. But it had left something behind. It left a ripple in the consciousness of the few who knew. It left a realization that the door to the solar system was open, and someone had just walked by to peek inside. The public went on with their lives, buying groceries and paying bills, unaware that they had been examined. They were unaware that the great silence of the universe had been broken, and that the silence of their leaders was the only thing keeping them from the truth. The visitor had come, it had seen, and it had remained silent. But usually in the history of exploration, when a scout comes and leaves without a sound, it is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an invasion. To understand why the astronomers at the observatory held their breath, you must first understand that the universe usually follows the rules. Planets move in predictable ovals, comets grow tails when they get warm, and asteroids are jagged, potato-shaped rocks that tumble lazily through the dark. When we look up, we expect these familiar behaviours. It is the clockwork of the cosmos. But 3i Atlas did not care for our clockwork. As the data streamed in, breaking down the light and motion of this visitor, it became clear that we were looking at a puzzle with 7 distinct pieces that simply did not fit together. These are the 7 anomalies that turned a routine observation into a scientific mystery. The first anomaly, the hyperbolic trajectory. Imagine the solar system as a flat dinner plate. All the planets from Mercury to Neptune race around the Sun on this flat surface. Most comets and asteroids we see are also trapped on this plate or close to it. but 3i Atlas arrived like a diver plunging from a high board. It dropped down from the deep cold north of the galaxy, cutting through the plane of our planets at a near vertical angle. This shape of movement is what astronomers call hyperbolic. In simple terms, it means the object was never ours. It was not born here. It was not circling our sun. It was a traveller moving so fast, over 26 kilometers per second, before it even touched our gravity that the sun could not catch it. It was just passing through a tourist on a one-way trip to infinity. The second anomaly, the extreme aspect ratio. When we try to see an object this small and distant, we cannot take a clear photograph like a portrait. Instead, we watch how its light flickers. Imagine a coin spinning on a table. Sometimes you see the broad, shiny face, and sometimes you see only the thin, dark edge. By measuring how the brightness changes, we can guess the shape. Usually asteroids vary in brightness just a little bit, suggesting they are round or clumpy. 3i Atlas was different. Its brightness dropped by a factor of 10 every few hours. For the light to change that drastically, the object had to be incredibly long and thin. The mathematical model suggested something bizarre, a shape with a length-to-width ratio of roughly 10:1. Picture a long thin cigar, or perhaps a flat stretched-out pancake tumbling end over end through the void. Nature rarely creates such perfect elongated splinters. The third anomaly, the tumbling rotation. Most things in space find astral laws. Earth spins smoothly. The moon keeps one face to us, but 3i's Atlas was dancing to a chaotic beat. It was not just spinning, it was tumbling. Imagine throwing a hammer through the air, the handle flips and twists in a complex pattern. This tumbling motion suggested that 3i Atlas had endured a violent history. Perhaps it had been kicked out of its home system by a giant planet, or maybe it had collided with something long ago. It was drifting through the stars in a state of permanent dizzying instability, turning over and over in the silence. The fourth anomaly, the spectral colour. When we analysed the light reflecting off its surface, a process called spectroscopy, we expected to see the signature of ice or common rock. Instead, the data painted a picture of something dark and red. This deep reddish hue is often seen on objects that have been exposed to cosmic radiation for millions, perhaps billions of years. It suggests a surface rich in metals or carbon-based compounds baked by the harsh light of distant stars until they formed a thick organic crust. It looked like an ancient artifact covered in the rust of the universe, shielding whatever lay beneath. The fifth anomaly, the high reflectivity. Despite being dark red, the object was surprisingly shiny in certain ways. Astronomers call this albedo. Comets are usually as dark as charcoal, absorbing almost all the sunlight that hits them. 3i Atlas, however, had a sheen to it. Some models hinted that it might be reflecting light more like polished metal than dull rock. This led to a strange contradiction. How could something be dark red yet shiny? One theory was that it had a metallic surface coated in thin ancient dust. If it were a metal sheet thin and reflective, it would explain why it flickered so violently in the sun. The sixth anomaly, the missing tail. This was the point where the astronomers began to frown. When an object from deep space gets close to the sun, it gets hot. If it is a comet, the ice inside it boils instantly, turning into gas and dust. This creates a coma, a glowing cloud around the object and a beautiful tail. Atlas flew closer to the sun than Mercury. It was baked by intense solar heat. By all the laws of physics, if it had any water or ice, it should have exploded with steam. We should have seen a tail. We saw nothing. The telescopes stared, but the object remained a pinpoint of light. No dust, no gas, no tail. It was a dry object. This meant it was likely made of rock or metal, not ice. The seventh anomaly, the non-gravitational acceleration. This is the final anomaly, the one that keeps scientists awake at night. As 3i Atlas left the solar system moving away from the sun, it should have slowed down. Gravity pulls everything back, but when we measured its speed, something was wrong. The object was moving faster than gravity allowed. It was a tiny difference, barely noticeable, but it was there. It was accelerating. Usually comets accelerate because they shoot out jets of gas like a rocket engine pushing them forward. But remember the sixth anomaly, there was no gas, there was no tail, there were no jets visible to our sensors. So what was pushing it? If it had no engine and no gas jets, there was only one natural explanation left: sunlight. If an object is extremely thin and light like a sheet of paper or a solar sail, the physical pressure of light particles hitting it can actually push it forward. But for the sun's light to push a rock that hard, the rock would have to be thinner than a few millimeters spread out over a large area. Nature does not make hollow rocks. Nature does not make giant sheets of ultra-thin metal. This was the puzzle. We had an object shaped like a needle, or a saucer tumbling chaotically red with age, dry as a bone, and moving as if something or someone was gently pressing on the gas pedal. It defied the classification of asteroid and comet. It was something third, something new. The data sat on the screen silent and stubborn. The numbers did not lie, but they told a story that sounded like science fiction. As 3i Atlas faded into the dark, rushing back toward the interstellar deep, it left us with the unsettling realization that the universe is far stranger than our models predicted. To understand the gravity of the search for IM-1, one must first understand the man standing alone at the center of the storm. Abraham A.V. Loeb was not an outsider shouting from the fringe. He was the ultimate insider. He sat in the Frank B. Baird Jr. Chair of Science at Harvard University. He was the head of the astronomy department, a man who had published hundreds of papers on black holes and the first stars of the universe. Yet in the late summer, as the data regarding the fireball began to consume his thoughts, Avi found himself walking a very lonely path. In the world of high-level science, reputation is currency. Most scientists spend their careers carefully guarding this currency. They ask safe questions. They study things that fit into the models that already exist. When they see an anomaly, something that does not fit the instinct is usually to ignore it or force it to fit into a box they understand, but Avi was different. He possessed a trait that many of his peers had lost, a childlike curiosity that did not fear being wrong. He often compared himself to a boy walking on a beach looking for seashells. If he found a plastic bottle among the shells, he would not pretend that it was a shell just to make the other collectors happy. He would pick it up and ask, "Who dropped this here?" This question, why, and subsequently who, became the source of his isolation. When the data about IM-1 first appeared, showing an object moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible for a rock from our solar system, the academic community reacted with silence and then with dismissal. To them, it was just a measurement error. It was a glitch. It was impossible, so therefore it did not happen. Throughout the months of August and September, while the rest of the world went about its business, Avi sat in his study fighting a battle on two fronts. On one front, he was fighting the government bureaucracy to get the classified data declassified. On the other front, he was fighting the rigid mindset of modern astronomy. He felt a deep frustration with the echo chamber of academia where scientists only talked to people who agreed with them. He realized that if he wanted to find the truth about this fireball, he could not rely on the traditional peer review system, which could take months or years to approve an idea. He needed to move faster. He needed to build a case in real time. This is when Avi turned to the public. He began writing. He treated the online platform Medium like a captain's log or a scientific diary. Day after day, he posted essays explaining his logic. He did not use complex equations that only 5 people in the world could understand. He used logic, philosophy, and clear evidence. He explained that science is not about knowing the answer before you look. It is about having the courage to look even when you might not like what you find. In his writings during these months, you could feel the psychological weight of his position. It takes a tremendous amount of bravery to stand up and say, "I think this might be technology from another civilization," when your colleagues are rolling their eyes. He wrote about the material strength of the object. The sensors from the US government had picked up the explosion of the meteor in the lower atmosphere. The data showed that IM-1 exploded much lower than a normal space rock would. This meant it was tough. In fact, it was tougher than iron. It was tougher than almost any space rock ever recorded in the NASA catalogue. Avi argued that there were only 2 possibilities. The first was that IM-1 was a natural rock from another star system that happened to be made of something harder than anything we have ever seen in our own solar system. That alone would be a major discovery. The second possibility, the one that made people uncomfortable, was that it was artificial. Perhaps it was a spacecraft or a probe or a piece of debris sent by intelligence. He built his dossier of evidence piece by piece. He pointed to the speed. The object was moving faster than 95% of all the stars in the vicinity of the Sun. This excess speed suggested it was not bound to our Sun's gravity. It was a traveller. He pointed to the trajectory. He pointed to the confirmation letter from the US Space Command, which stated with 99.9% certainty that the object came from outside the solar system. While the academic elites whispered that Avi was risking his legacy, the media began to pay attention. They saw something compelling in this lonely astronomer. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist in a basement. He was a Harvard professor, using the scientific method to ask the biggest question of all. Are we alone? Journalists from major newspapers and TV networks began reaching out. They found Avi to be open, articulate, and passionately logical. He told them that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. He told them that we cannot assume we are the smartest kid on the block. This media support in August and September was crucial. It did not just stroke his ego, it provided a shield. It made it harder for the scientific community to simply silence him. It also helped attract funding. Avi knew that writing papers was not enough. He needed to go to the Pacific Ocean. He needed a boat. He needed a magnetic sled. He needed a team, and all of that required money. By sharing his journey publicly, by explaining the why so clearly, he inspired private donors who were tired of safe science and wanted to be part of an adventure. There were nights when the doubt must have crept in. What if he went all the way to the ocean and found nothing? What if it was just a sensor error? But Avi drew strength from history. He thought of Galileo, who was put under house arrest for saying the Earth moved around the sun. He thought of the long line of scientists who were ridiculed before they were celebrated. He realized that the pain of isolation was the price of discovery. By the end of September, the lonely astronomer was no longer quite so lonely. He had built a coalition of the willing, a group of supporters, readers, and open-minded scientists who wanted to know the truth. He had transformed a few lines of data on a government spreadsheet into a compelling case for an interstellar expedition. He had successfully argued that it was worth the risk to look. He was ready to leave the safety of his Harvard office and face the open ocean armed with nothing but his calculations and the unshakable belief that the universe is much more interesting than we give it credit for. The dossier was complete. The target was locked. Now he just had to go and find it. When we look at the history of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, the most haunting aspect is not what was seen in the sky. The most haunting aspect is the silence on the ground. For decades, the most powerful media organizations and the most prestigious scientific institutions in the United States turned away from this subject. It's easy to blame this silence on a dark, secret group of people in a smoke-filled room. We often imagine a grand conspiracy where the government sends agents to silence reporters. While government secrecy is real, the broader silence in American culture is much more complex. It is not a top-down order, it is a bottom-up agreement. It is not a conspiracy, it is a culture. This is what we can call the architecture of silence. This architecture is built on a mechanism known as gatekeeping. In media and science, gatekeepers are the editors, producers, and senior professors who decide what is news and what is nonsense. They do not necessarily hide the truth because they are evil. They hide it because they are afraid. They are not afraid of aliens, they are afraid of losing their credibility. In the world of American journalism, reputation is the only currency that matters. To be a serious journalist is to report on politics, war, the economy, and social issues. For a long time, reporting on UFOs was considered a career suicide. It was the third rail of journalism. If you touched it, your career died. This created a powerful social filter. An editor at a major newspaper did not need a call from the CIA to kill a story about a flying disc. The editor killed the story himself because he did not want his newspaper to look foolish. This is often called the giggle factor. It is a psychological defense mechanism. When we encounter something that threatens our understanding of the world, we laugh at it to make it smaller. If we giggle, it becomes a joke, and jokes cannot hurt us. For 50 years, the American media used ridicule to police the boundaries of reality. If a pilot saw something defying physics, the news anchor would play the X-Files music and make a joke about little green men. That laughter was the sound of the gate closing. However, the architecture of silence goes deeper than just embarrassment. It is rooted in a fear of shifting paradigms. A paradigm is the map we use to understand reality. Our current map says that humans are the most advanced intelligence on Earth, that technology evolves in a straight line, and that the laws of physics are set in stone. UAP defy this map. They suggest that our technology is primitive, that our physics is incomplete, and that we are not the masters of our environment. Institutions hate to change their maps. History tells us that whenever a new discovery challenges the core belief of a society, the society fights back. When Galileo suggested the Earth moved around the sun, the institutions of his time did not welcome him. They silenced him. They did this because his idea did not just change a map, it changed the meaning of being human. The American scientific community faces a similar problem today. Science is built on the accumulation of data. It requires things to be repeatable and predictable. UAP are often unpredictable. They appear and disappear. They do not land on the White House lawn to be measured. Because science cannot easily measure them, many scientists choose to ignore them. It is safer to say the data is bad than to say our understanding of reality is limited. This creates a cycle of denial. The media will not report on it because scientists do not take it seriously. Scientists will not take it seriously because there is no respectable data. The government does not release data because the media treats the subject as a joke. This is a self-reinforcing loop. It is a fortress of silence built by mutual consent. We must also consider the concept of ontological shock. Ontology is the philosophical study of being and reality. Ontological shock happens when your reality is shattered. If the US government or major media admitted that these objects are real and not made by humans, it would cause a profound psychological crisis. Imagine the questions that would follow. If we are being visited, who are they? What do they want? Can we defend ourselves? Are our religions correct? These are not questions about the news. They are questions about our existence. The gatekeepers of media and science protect us from these questions. They act as a buffer zone. They keep the world mundane and predictable so that society can function normally. Therefore, the silence regarding UAP was never just about hiding a spaceship. It was about maintaining social order. It was about protecting the status quo. The gatekeepers believed that the public could not handle the uncertainty. They believed that stability was more important than the truth. But today, this architecture is beginning to crack. The rise of independent media, the internet, and brave whistleblowers has eroded the power of the traditional gatekeepers. The giggle factor is fading. We are beginning to realize that the silence was not protecting us from the unknown. It was blinding us to the reality of our universe. The architecture of silence was built to make us feel safe, but it also kept us small. As we dismantle this structure, we are not just finding new aircraft in the sky. We are finding the courage to face a universe that is far stranger and more complex than we were allowed to believe. The silence is ending not because the gatekeepers decided to speak, but because the reality is too loud to ignore any longer. For days, the air had felt heavy, like the sky before a summer thunderstorm. In the newsrooms of major television networks, the editors were still playing it safe. They offered the public 30-second clips and sound bites sanitized and stripped of their terrifying implications. They treated the phenomenon as a curiosity, a filler story between the weather forecast and political scandals. But on the internet, in the deep currents of forums and private message boards, the pressure was building. The public was starving for something real. They were tired of being treated like children who needed to be protected from the truth. Then came the notification. It was not a breaking news alert from a government agency. It was not a press release from the White House. It was a simple ping on millions of smartphones around the world. A new episode was live. The setting was deceptively simple. There was no dramatic lighting, no teleprompter, and no makeup team. It was just a small room lined with red brick and acoustic foam. Two men sat across from each other at a wooden table wearing headphones. On one side was Joe Rogan, the everyman's host, open-minded and skeptical in equal measure. On the other side was Avi, the scientist, who refused to look away from the data. This was the breach. For the first hour, the conversation wandered, as real conversations do. This was the power of the long-form format. In a 3-minute news segment, a guest has to shout their point before the commercial break. Nuance is destroyed by the clock. But here time was irrelevant. They spoke for 3 hours. In that expansive space, ideas were allowed to breathe, to stretch out and to be examined from every angle. The energy shifted when Avi leaned into the microphone to explain the core problem of modern science and the government's refusal to engage with the unknown. He used a metaphor that would ripple across the internet within minutes of the broadcast, the analogy of the tennis ball. He asked the listeners to imagine a primitive human walking through the forest 10,000 years ago. This human knows every rock, every tree, and every bird. If this human finds a smooth grey stone on the ground, he does not be surprised. He knows nature makes stones. He might pick it up, look at it, and perhaps use it to crack open a nut. It fits into his model of reality. The stone is natural, it belongs there. But then Avi said, imagine that same primitive human finds a tennis ball. The human picks it up. It is fuzzy. It is bright yellow, a colour that does not appear often in the mud and rocks of his home. It has a curved white line running perfectly around its surface. When he drops it, it bounces back up to his hand with an energy that a rock does not possess. The primitive human does not know what a tennis ball is. He does not know the rules of tennis. He does not know about rubber factories or pressurized gas. He has zero context for this object. However, he knows one thing for certain: nature did not make this. The wind and the rain did not carve this object. It was manufactured. It was created with intent. Avi paused, letting the image sink in. He explained that for decades, scientists and governments have been looking at the sky and insisting that everything they see is a rock. They see a light moving at 30,000 miles per hour, and they say it is a weather phenomenon. They see an object dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second, and they say it is a sensor glitch. They are forcing the tennis ball to be a rock because they are terrified of the idea that someone else is playing a game they do not understand. This analogy cut through the noise. It was simple, elegant, and devastatingly clear. It bypassed the complex physics and the classified documents and went straight to common sense. It gave the audience a tool to understand what they were seeing. It validated the gut feeling of millions of people who knew that the blurry videos and the pilot testimonies were not just swamp gas or birds. As the interview continued, the viewer count climbed. It went from thousands to millions. This was information flowing without a gatekeeper. There was no editor to cut the segment when AV criticised the academic establishment for their arrogance. There was no producer to silence Joe when he asked the hard questions about biological entities and crash retrievals. The comments section on the video moved so fast it became a blur of text, a digital waterfall of human reaction. People were waking up in real time. You could see the shift in the collective consciousness. At the start of the stream, the comments were jokes and memes. By the second hour, the tone had changed to shock and awe. By the third hour, there was a solemn realization that the world was not what they had been told it was. The breach had occurred. The dam holding back the truth had developed a fatal crack. It wasn't a leak of classified documents that did it. It was a conversation. It was the realization that two human beings speaking honestly for 3 hours could make more sense of the universe than 40 years of official government statements. The energy of the event was kinetic. It felt like the moment in a movie where the protagonist finally looks behind the curtain. The silence that had suffocated the topic for so long was replaced by a roar of inquiry. People weren't just watching, they were sharing. Clips of the tennis ball analogy spread to every social media platform. It was translated into Spanish, French, Japanese, and Portuguese. The mainstream media tried to catch up the next day. They ran segments trying to debunk the interview or mock the participants, but it was too late. The signal was already out. The difference in quality was too stark. Why would anyone listen to a scripted 2-minute dismissal from a news anchor when they had just watched a Harvard scientist explain the reality of the situation for 3 uninterrupted hours? On that day, October 28th, the monopoly on truth ended. The public realized that they did not need permission to know. They realized that if the government wouldn't tell them about the tennis ball, they would go out into the forest and find it themselves. The fear of the unknown was replaced by the thrill of discovery. The atmosphere was no longer heavy, it was electric. The world had changed not because of an invasion, but because of a conversation. It started not with a press conference in Washington, nor with an emergency broadcast across national television networks. It started on a Tuesday morning, while most of the Western Hemisphere was drinking their first cup of coffee, with a notification that lit up 300 million screens simultaneously. Kim Kardashian had tweeted, "For weeks, the scientific community of intersect had been trying to manage the narrative regarding the anomaly. They had held careful, somber meetings. They had released peer-reviewed papers filled with jargon that only 0.01% of the population could actually understand. They spoke in hushed tones about probabilities and trajectory analysis and atmospheric entry vectors. They were trying to avoid panic. They were trying to be the adults in the room." Then Kim posted a selfie. It was a photo taken from the balcony of her Hidden Hills mansion. She was wearing a silver robe that looked vaguely futuristic, looking up at the sky with a perfectly confused expression. The caption was short-typed in all lowercase letters and devoid of any punctuation. "Guys, why is the star getting bigger? Is it coming for us, lol?" That was it. In the history of modern communication, few sentences have carried as much weight as those 14 words. Within 10 minutes, the post had 2 million likes. Within an hour, it was the #1 trending topic on Earth, surpassing World War III and the Super Bowl. The reaction inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was, to put it mildly, a total meltdown. Dr. Aristone, the lead trajectory specialist, stared at his computer screen watching the social media engagement numbers climb vertically. He had spent 40 years studying orbital mechanics, he had 2 PhDs, he had written the definitive book on asteroid deflection, and yet his urgent press release from the night before, which detailed the exact speed of the object at 20,000 miles per hour, had been shared exactly 400 times, mostly by other scientists. "She put LOL at the end," Aristone muttered, his face bearing into his hands. "We are facing a potential extinction-level event, or at least a massive atmospheric disruption," and she added a laughing acronym. The public relations department at NASA was in a state of panic that bordered on catatonia. The old institutions, the government bodies, the universities, the legacy news networks were suddenly realizing that they no longer held the keys to the kingdom of truth. For decades, they operated on the assumption that if they spoke with authority, the public would listen. They believed that a seal of approval from a government agency was the ultimate verification. They were wrong. In the modern era, authority does not come from credentials. It comes from followers. By noon, the Kim K theory had taken over the internet. The discourse shifted instantly. It was no longer about the physics of the object. It was about the vibe of the object. People weren't asking about the mass or the density. They were asking if the alien object had a skincare routine. They were asking if the impact would ruin the summer festival season. The intersection of serious science and entertainment culture had crashed, resulting in a bizarre neon-coloured wreckage. Major news networks, desperate to keep up with the social media cycle, began to pivot. CNN invited an astrophysicist to speak, but they also invited a pop culture historian to analyse Kim's tweet. The astrophysicist tried to explain that the object was travelling at 15 kilometres per second. The host interrupted him to ask, "But do you think Kim knows something we don't? Is she in a bunker?" The scientist blinked, confused by the sheer absurdity of the question. "I don't think Ms. Kardashian has access to classified satellite telemetry," he stammered. "But she has intuition," the host countered. This was the moment the ripple turned into a tsunami. The line between reality and content dissolved completely. The approaching object ceased to be a physical threat and became a main character in the global reality show. Influencers began to mobilize. TikTok was flooded with asteroid makeup tutorials, looks to wear, while the world ends. The colors were dark purples and metallic silvers, mimicking the blurry photos NASA had released. People were doing dances synchronized to the rhythm of a pulsating radio signal that astronomers had detected from the object. The signal was a terrifying scientific mystery. The internet turned it into a dubstep remix. The panic of the old institutions was palpable. They tried to regain control. The White House issued a statement urging citizens to listen only to official channels. But the official channels were dry, boring, and slow. The internet was fast, funny, and engaging. It was a harsh lesson in the mechanics of modern society. A scientific paper demands that you sit down, focus, and think critically. It asks for your labour. A tweet, however, gives you a dopamine hit. It asks for nothing but a double tap. In the economy of attention, the tweet is a more efficient currency than the truth. 3 days after the tweet, NASA decided they had no choice but to surrender to the current. They couldn't beat the pop culture wave, so they had to surf it. In a move that made several senior scientists threaten to resign, NASA's social media team reached out to Kim Kardashian's publicist. They didn't want to silence her. They wanted to collaborate. They didn't. The Zoom call was surreal. On one side of the screen sat the director of NASA, a man who had helped put rovers on Mars, wearing a wrinkled suit and looking utterly exhausted. On the other side was Kim, perfectly lit by a ring light, holding an iced coffee. "We need you to tell them to stay calm," the director said, his voice straining to maintain dignity. "People are buying survival kits because of a meme you retweeted. We need you to post that the scientists have a plan." "So like a sponsored post?" Kim asked, genuinely trying to be helpful. "If that is what you call it," the director sighed. "Yes, we will give you the exclusive images of the object, high resolution. Before the New York Times gets them, you post them and you tell your followers to trust the experts." "Okay," she said, "but can I put a filter on the asteroid? It looks a little grey." The director closed his eyes for a long moment. "As long as you do not alter the trajectory data, you can use the filter." The resulting post changed the public sentiment overnight. Kim posted the high-definition image of the object. She used the sparkle filter, making the deadly celestial body look almost magical. The caption read, "Just got off the phone with my friends at NASA. They are working super hard and they say we are going to be fine. Trust the science guys. They are so smart. Also, this rock is kind of pretty, right? NASA, space vibes." It worked. Panic buying of toilet paper ceased. Trust in the space program shot up by 40% among the demographic of 18 to 35-year-olds. The crisis was managed not by the brilliant equations of Dr. Aristone, but by the social capital of a reality star. This event marked a permanent shift in the hierarchy of information. It forced the world to admit a painful truth: facts alone are no longer enough. Facts are heavy, cold, and often boring. To move the masses, facts must be wrapped in the shiny, digestible packaging of culture. The scientists went back to their labs, humbled and slightly bitter. They saved the world, technically speaking, by calculating the deflection angles and monitoring the data. But they knew that in the history books of the future, or at least in the Instagram archives, it would look like Kim Kardashian had saved the day with a single tweet. As the object passed harmlessly by Earth, missing the planet by a margin of 200,000 miles, the world didn't look up in silent awe at the majesty of the cosmos. They looked down at their phones. They were busy liking the memes. The old world of stoic authority was dead. The new world was here, and it was filtered, captioned, and trending. The ripple had become the ocean, and we were all just floating in it, waiting for the next notification to tell us how to feel. From November 1st to November 8th, something shifted in the atmosphere. For months, the internet had been whispering, buzzing, and slowly roaring with rumours and leaked emails. The mainstream media had maintained a wall of silence, hoping the noise would die down. But by the start of November, the pressure became too great. The dam did not just break. The engineers of public opinion opened the floodgates intentionally. This period serves as a perfect case study for students of communication. If you look closely at the hundreds of articles released during these 8 days, you will notice they all sound strangely similar. It was a coordinated release of information, but it was not designed to inform you in the traditional sense. It was designed to inoculate you. In medicine, inoculation involves giving a patient a small weakened dose of a virus so their body learns to fight it. In journalism, during this week, the media gave the public a small weakened and ridiculed version of the story so that the public would learn to reject it. Let us look at the first technique, the question basis headline. In journalism, there is an old rule known as Betteridge's law of headlines. It states that any headline that ends in a question mark can be answered by the word no. During this week, you likely saw dozens of headlines that look like this. Is there a child trafficking ring in a pizza shop? Or are these leaked emails proof of a crime? This is a subtle psychological trick. By framing the story as a question rather than a statement, the news outlet avoids legal liability because they're not technically making a claim. However, the true power lies in the tone. When a serious news organisation asks a question that sounds ridiculous, they are signalling to the reader that the answer is obvious. They're essentially asking, can you believe people actually think this? This technique invites the reader to join the writer in a position of intellectual superiority. It creates an us versus them dynamic. Us is the rational, educated readers who read the news. Them is the irrational, crazy mob on the internet. By the time you finish reading the headline, you have already been primed to dismiss the information before you even read a single sentence of the evidence. The second technique used heavily during these 8 days is semantic hedging. Language is a tool for painting reality. If I want you to believe a chair is sturdy, I say the solid oak chair. If I want you to doubt it, I say the alleged seating device. The object has not changed, but your perception of it has. Between November 1st and November 8th, the media deployed a specific vocabulary to describe the situation. They rarely used neutral words. Instead, they used hedging words, adjectives that cast doubt. You would see phrases like baseless claims, debunked conspiracy, fake news, and without evidence. Let us analyse the phrase without evidence. In a court of law, evidence is a physical thing presented to a judge. In journalism, without evidence is often used as a weapon. Technically, until a court rules on something, everything is an allegation. However, news outlets usually investigate allegations. During this week, they did not investigate. They declared. When a headline says the internet spreads claims without evidence, it suggests to the casual reader that there is absolutely nothing to look at. It implies a vacuum. The reality was that there were thousands of emails, the evidence, but the media decided that these emails did not count as proof. By controlling the definition of what constitutes evidence, they controlled the conclusion the reader would reach. They did not say, "We have not analysed the emails yet." They said the claims were baseless, effectively closing the door on curiosity. The third technique is the sandwich method of context. When you have to report on a story you do not want to report on, you hide the core information in a sandwich of context. The top layer, the bun. The article begins by describing the people talking about the story. It describes them as trolls, alt-right, or conspiracy theorists. This attacks the character of the messenger before the message is delivered. The middle layer, the meat. This is the actual information, the mention of the emails, the pizza shop, or the strange codes. This section is usually very short, perhaps only 1 or 2 paragraphs in a long article. The bottom layer, the bun. The article ends by quoting an expert or a government official who denies everything, followed by a reminder of how dangerous fake news is to democracy. During this 8-day flood, this structure was used repeatedly. The effect on the reader is profound. You walk away remembering that bad people are spreading dangerous lies, but you often cannot recall exactly what the specific details of the lie were. The specific codes and words found in the emails were buried under layers of analysis about why people believe crazy things. The news became less about the event and more about the psychology of the people discussing the event. This leads us to the concept of the safe reality. Why does this work? Why do intelligent people accept this framing? It is not because they are stupid. It is because the alternative is terrifying. The media understands that the human mind prefers order over chaos. The story that was bubbling up from the internet, the idea that powerful, celebrated people might be involved in something truly dark, is a chaotic, frightening concept. It shatters the worldview that our society is generally good and functional. The media offered a life raft during the flood. By labeling the story as fake news and debunked, they provided a safe harbour for the public's mind. They offered a comforting narrative. The world is not dark and scary, it is just that some people on the internet are crazy. Most people, when given the choice between a horrifying truth and a comforting dismissal, will choose the dismissal. It feels better. It requires less emotional work. The media knew this. They did not have to disprove every single email or code word. They just had to provide enough social permission for people to look away. By November 8th, the flood of articles had done its job. The search engine results were now dominated by the mainstream articles calling the story a hoax. If a curious person went to Google to search for the terms found in the emails, they would not find the original emails first. They would find 10% pages of articles from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN explaining why those terms meant nothing. They successfully flooded the zone. They buried the primary source material under a mountain of secondary analysis. They did not burn the books, they just wrote a million reviews saying the books were not worth reading. This was not a failure of journalism, it was a masterpiece of crisis management. They utilized the authority of their brand names, the psychology of language, and the sheer volume of output to suffocate a story that was threatening to grow out of control. They managed to tell the public about the fire while simultaneously convincing them that the smoke was just a figment of their imagination. Understanding this week is crucial. It teaches us that when the media speaks with one voice using the same adjectives and the same sentence structures, they are not reporting news. They are constructing a narrative. They are building a wall, not a window. And once you see the bricks, the question marks, the hedging words, the sandwich structure, you can never unsee them. You realize that you are not being informed, you are being managed. The old archives of the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Ohio hold more than just dust and magnetic tapes. Most people know the story of August 1977. They know about Jerry Ehman, the astronomer who looked at a computer printout, saw a sequence of letters and numbers denoting a massive spike in radio waves, and wrote the word "wow" in the margin with a red pen. That signal originating from the constellation Sagittarius became the most famous evidence we have ever had for extraterrestrial intelligence. However, the public story stops there. It tells you about the loud shout from the stars, but it never mentions the soft, rhythmic breathing that was hiding underneath it. For decades, the focus was entirely on the intensity of the signal. The code 6QGI represented the height of the radio wave, or how loud it was compared to the background noise of the universe. But recently, a small group of researchers decided to look at something else. They did not look at how loud the signal was. They looked at the silence between the pulses. They looked at the structure of the static that surrounded the main event. What they found was not random noise. It was a pattern so precise, so mathematically perfect that it sends a cold shiver down the spine of anyone who understands what it means. They found the Fibonacci sequence. In nature here on Earth, the sequence is everywhere. You start with 0 and 1, and then every new number is the sum of the two before it. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. It is the formula for the perfect spiral. You see it in the way a fern unfurls its leaves in the morning. You see it in the curve of a nautilus shell on the beach. You see it in the arrangement of seeds in the center of a sunflower. It is often called the golden ratio, the fingerprint of growth, the signature of life itself. But you do not see it in the vacuum of space. Stars do not count. Gas clouds do not do math. Pulsars, dead stars that spin rapidly, act like cosmic lighthouses beaming radiation at us with perfect timing, but they are like a metronome. They tick, tick, tick at a steady, unchangeable rate. They do not change their rhythm. They do not count up. The unpublished analysis of the WOW signal data suggests that for 72 seconds, the exact duration the signal was audible, the background frequency was modulating. It wasn't just a steady tone, it was pulsing, and it wasn't pulsing randomly. Imagine you are sitting in a dark room and someone knocks on the door. That was the main signal. But now imagine that just before and after the knock you hear a tap, then a pause, then another tap. Then 2 rapid taps, then 3, then 5, then 8. The rhythm is undeniable. The signal was counting. This realization changes everything. If it were just a loud blast of radio waves, we could argue it was a freak accident of nature. Maybe 2 comets collided. Maybe a secret military satellite malfunctioned. But nature does not create the Fibonacci sequence in radio waves. Nature creates chaos, or it creates simple repetitive cycles. To encode the golden ratio into a signal requires intent. It requires a mind. It requires someone to sit it down, program a transmitter and say, I will send this specific pattern so they know we are not a rock or a storm. The frequency they used adds another layer of terror and awe to this discovery. The signal arrived at 1420 megahertz. This is the frequency of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Every astronomer on Earth knows that if you wanted to talk to another civilization, you would use the hydrogen line, because it is the universal water cooler. It is the one channel everyone is listening to. So we have a signal on the most common channel in the universe displaying the most common mathematical pattern of life. It's the cosmic equivalent of a stranger walking up to you in a foreign country, looking you in the eye, and showing you a picture of your own DNA. It implies a deep, uncomfortable familiarity. It suggests that whoever sent this wasn't just blasting noise into the dark. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew about the math that governs the spirals of galaxies and the petals of flowers. They knew that we would know it too. The truly chilling part of the unpublished data is how high the sequence went before the signal was cut off by the rotation of the Earth. The data shows the pulses climbing higher and higher, 55, 89, 144. As the numbers grew, the precision of the signal became sharper, as if the sender was focusing the beam locking onto us. There is a theory among the researchers who uncovered this that the Fibonacci sequence was not the message itself. It was just the handshake. It was the hello. In computer networking, before 2 machines exchange data, they perform a handshake to prove they are compatible. The mathematical perfection of the sequence was likely a test. They were asking, are you smart enough to hear the whispers inside the noise? Do you understand the language of the universe? For 40 years we thought we missed the message because we couldn't decode the loud hum. But the truth is haunting, we missed the message because we weren't listening closely enough to the silence. And there is one final detail that keeps these astronomers awake at night. In the final milliseconds of the recording, just before the Big Ear telescope lost the signal, the pattern shifted. The sequence stopped following the Fibonacci addition. The last 3 pulses did not add up to the next number. Instead, the data suggests the rhythm inverted. It started counting down. Why would it count down? A countdown usually implies an arrival. It implies that the introduction is over and the main event is about to begin. We lost the signal in 1977 because our planet turned away looking back into the empty dark. We never heard what happened when the countdown reached 0. Did the message continue? Is it still washing over us right now, hidden in the static of our televisions and radios, waiting for us to notice that the noise isn't random? We have been looking for monsters or little green men, but the reality is far more majestic and terrifying. We are looking for a mathematician. We are looking for a mirror. The whispers in the radio waves tell us that out there in the crushing blackness between the stars, there is something that thinks like us, counts like us, and knows exactly where we are. And they have been waiting a very long time for us to answer the door. The year was 2006 and a new giant had arrived in the orbit of the red planet. Its name was the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, or MRO for short. For those who had spent decades staring at grainy, low-resolution images of the Martian surface, the MRO was not just a machine, it was the answer to a prayer. It carried a camera known as HiRISE, which stood for High Resolution Imaging Science Experiment. This was not an ordinary camera. It was a massive telescope pointing down at the ground, capable of seeing objects as small as a dinner table from hundreds of kilometers away. The promise of this technology was intoxicating. No longer would we have to guess what a blurry shadow was. No longer would we have to argue over pixels that were tens of meters wide. With HiRISE, we would see the rocks, the sand dunes, and the strange geometric structures with crystal clarity. Naturally, the independent research community had one specific target in mind: Cydonia. The region of the face and the pyramids was the first place everyone wanted to look with this new powerful eye in the sky. NASA knew this. The space agency had publicly stated that they would rephotograph the Cydonia region as soon as the orbit allowed. They claimed to be transparent, promising that the days of secrecy were over. But as the scheduled time for the flyby approached, the atmosphere shifted from excitement to a familiar heavy anxiety. The timeline was set. The orbiter passed over the target zone. In control rooms and home offices around the world, researchers sat in front of their computer screens waiting. In the age of the internet, data was supposed to be fast. We expected that within hours, or perhaps a day, the raw images would appear on the public servers. We were ready to analyze, to debate, and to finally see the truth, but the images did not appear. At first, the delay seemed normal. Space travel is difficult, and sending large data files across millions of kilometers of empty space is a slow process. People told themselves to be patient, but then 24 hours turned into 48. 2 days turned into a week. The servers remained empty of the specific images everyone was looking for. The silence from the space agency was deafening. What made the situation strange was that other images were being released. The MRO was clearly working. It was sending back beautiful high-definition pictures of craters, ice caps, and random valleys. The stream of data was flowing for the rest of the planet, but for Cydonia the stream had been cut off. It was as if a black hole had opened up in the data pipeline, swallowing only the information that pertained to the most controversial site on Mars. When the questions started flooding in, the explanations offered by officials were messy and contradictory. This is where the feeling of bureaucracy began to overshadow the science. One statement claimed that the spacecraft had entered safe mode due to a software glitch right as it was passing over the target. This seemed like an incredible coincidence. Out of all the thousands of orbits, the machine malfunctioned at the exact second it was above the face. Then the story changed. Another explanation was released stating that the atmospheric dust was too thick and the image quality was too poor to release. They claimed they did not want to disappoint the public with a hazy picture. This was confusing because the atmospheric monitors on the same satellite showed that the air over Cydonia was relatively clear at the time. Later, a third excuse appeared. They said the data link to Earth had been interrupted by a prioritization issue with the Deep Space Network, the massive antennas used to talk to spacecraft. They claimed the images were stuck in the onboard memory of the orbiter and would be downloaded eventually. For the researchers waiting on the ground, these shifting stories created a deep sense of unease. It felt less like technical difficulty, more like management. It felt like a stalling tactic. The emotion was not just frustration, it was the helpless feeling of standing outside a locked door, knowing that the people inside were holding the very thing you needed to see. This period of waiting highlighted the power dynamic between the public and the institution. The data belonged to humanity paid for by tax dollars, yet it was being held in a shadowy limbo. It forced us to ask what happens to an image before it is released, who sees it first. We imagine a pipeline where a photo is taken, sent to Earth, and immediately posted online, but the delay suggested a different process. It suggested that there were eyes reviewing the data before we were allowed to see it. It suggested a filter. If the camera had captured something truly undeniable, a clear artificial structure with right angles and smooth surfaces, would that image ever make it to the public server? Or would it be caught in this processing delay forever? The technical specifications of the camera made the wait even more agonizing. We knew that high-rise could resolve details down to 30 centimeters per pixel. At that level, you cannot hide much. If there was a building, we would see the roof. If there was a statue, we would see the features. The delay suggested that perhaps the image was too good. Finally, after weeks of excuses and the mounting pressure of public inquiry, the images were released. When they finally appeared on the screen, the relief was mixed with lingering suspicion. The photos were indeed high resolution, but they were often processed in ways that flattened the contrast or changed the lighting angles. While they showed more detail than the 1976 Viking photos, the delay had done its damage. The missing images of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter became a symbol of the modern struggle for truth. It was not just about rocks on Mars anymore. It was about the opaque wall of bureaucracy. It was about the realization that in the digital age, information can be paused, edited, or withheld with the click of a button. The wait proved that while the technology to see the truth existed, the willingness to share it was a different matter entirely. We had the eyes to see, but we were at the mercy of the hands that held the telescope. When we look at the path 3i Atlas took through our neighborhood, we are forced to confront a geometry that feels less like an accident and more like a map. To understand why this object is so controversial, we must look beyond its shape or its shiny surface. We must look at where it went, how it moved, and specifically who it visited. In the vast emptiness of space, rocks usually tumble along predictable paths determined by the gravity of the sun. They are slaves to Isaac Newton's laws. However, the trajectory of 3i Atlas suggests something different. If you were a captain trying to steer a ship to gather the most information about the habitable zone of our solar system, with the least amount of fuel you would have charted the exact course that this object took. The perfect flyby. The object did not approach us on the flat plane where all the planets orbit known as the ecliptic. Instead, it dropped in from above, originating from the direction of the star Vega in the constellation Lyra. This acts as a perfect vantage point. By coming in from the north pole of the solar system, the object had a clear, unobstructed view of the entire planetary system without having to dodge the asteroid belt or other debris. Its interaction with Earth was the most suspicious part of the journey. On October 14, 2017, 3i Atlas passed Earth at a distance of roughly 15 million miles. In astronomical terms, this is a hair's breadth. It is roughly 16 times the distance to the Moon. But it was not just the distance, it was the timing. The object intercepted Earth's orbit year at the precise moment Earth was there. Space is incredibly vast and mostly empty. For a random rock ejected from a distant star system to accidentally thread the needle and pass that close to the only habitable planet in the system is statistically unlikely. It is like throwing a dart from New York and hitting a specific coin spinning in the air in Tokyo. The Mars and Jupiter checkpoints. After buzzing past Earth, the object did not simply leave. It continued its journey outward, passing the orbit of Mars on November 1st. It then continued toward the orbit of Jupiter, which it passed in May of 2018. This sequence, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, represents a grand tour of the most significant bodies in our immediate neighbourhood. Earth is the biological centre, Mars is the secondary candidate for life or colonisation, and Jupiter is the gravitational anchor of the system. If this were a random asteroid, its path would be a smooth curve dictated solely by the Sun's gravity. However, as we discussed in previous parts, 3i Atlas exhibited a non-gravitational acceleration. It sped up. It pushed itself away from the Sun, slightly deviating from the path a rock should take by several thousand miles. If we view this through the lens of a probe hypothesis, this deviation makes sense. Probe might make small course corrections to ensure its sensors are pointed correctly, or to maximize the slingshot effect to gain speed for its exit back into deep space. It behaved less like a tumbling stone and more like a vessel utilizing a gravity assist, a maneuver human space agencies use all the time to save fuel: the silence of the observatories. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of the 3i Atlas event was not the object itself, but our reaction to it. We possess some of the most powerful eyes in the history of the universe: the giant telescopes in Hawaii, the radio arrays in Chile, and the Hubble Space Telescope in orbit. Yet when the most significant astronomical event of the millennium occurred, these great eyes were mostly shut. For the first few vital days, when the object was closest and brightest, we did not train our most powerful sensors on it. Why? Because of a deep-seated scientific bias. The assumption was that it must be a rock. The scientific community operates on a principle that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. While this is a healthy rule for filtering out nonsense, it can become a paralyzing trap. Because astronomers assumed it was a comet or an asteroid, they waited. They applied for time on telescopes through standard slow bureaucratic channels. By the time the major observatories truly focused on 3i Atlas, it was already tumbling away into the dark millions of miles away. We missed the opportunity to take a high-resolution photograph. We missed the chance to listen for radio signals while it was close. We treated a visitor like a ghost. We assumed it wasn't real until it was already gone. The mirror. Are we being watched? This trajectory forces us to ask a question that makes many scientists uncomfortable. What if we are the exhibits in a zoo? If 3i Atlas was a probe, its mission was likely information gathering. The path it took allowed it to scan Earth's atmosphere. It would have easily detected oxygen, water vapor, and methane, the chemical signatures of life. It would have detected our radio waves, our television broadcasts, and our radar pulses. It saw us. The survey trajectory implies intent. It implies that someone or something wanted to know if the third rock from this sun was occupied. This leads to a psychological question for humanity. Why are we so afraid to admit this possibility? The data regarding the object's path is clear, the acceleration is clear, the shape is clear, yet the mainstream explanation remains a strange rock. We are afraid to look back because looking back destroys our special status. As long as we are alone, we are the masters of the universe. We are the smartest things in existence. But if that trajectory was calculated, if that course was steered, then we are not Marmondit masters. We are merely indigenous people on an island watching a ship sail past on the horizon, unable to understand the technology that powers it. The trajectory of 3i Atlas was a line drawn in the sand. It proved that our solar system is accessible. It proved that interstellar does not mean impossible. The object has now passed the orbit of Neptune. It is heading back into the cold void between stars. It is carrying data. It has the light of our cities and the sound of our radios recorded in its history. The survey is complete. The only question that remains is, will they send another one? And next time, will we be brave enough to look it in the eye before it leaves? We have travelled a long road together. We have looked at the history of the skies, the secrets hidden in government files, and the strange stories from people all over the world. Now we stand at the edge of the ocean. We are looking out at the horizon. The water is calm right now, but we know that big waves might be coming. We are approaching specific dates that many people are talking about: December 19th and March 2026. Whether these dates bring a sudden loud noise or a quiet whisper, we do not know yet. But we must be ready. This chapter is not just about aliens or spaceships. It is about us. It is about how we keep our balance when the ground starts to shake. The dates on the calendar. Why are we looking at December 19th? Why is March of the year 2026 important in the world of research into unidentified phenomena? Dates often act like magnets. They pull our attention. Sometimes these dates are predicted by data patterns. Other times they are whispered by insiders who claim to know what is coming. Imagine you are waiting for a very important guest to arrive at your house. You clean the floors, you prepare the food, and you watch the clock. These dates are like the time that the guest is supposed to knock on the door. However, we must understand that time is complicated. In the world of cosmic events, dates can change. A prediction might be off by a few weeks or months or even years. If December 19th comes and the sky remains empty, it does not mean the phenomenon is not real. It simply means the schedule has changed. We must treat these dates not as a deadline for the end of the world, but as a window of opportunity. It is a time to pay attention, to look up and to listen carefully. 3 possible scenarios. As we move closer to these moments, what might actually happen? It is helpful to imagine the different possibilities so that we are not surprised. Here are 3 scenarios we might face. Scenario 1, the Great Silence. In this scenario, the dates pass and nothing obvious happens. The news channels talk about politics and weather. The internet is quiet. This can feel very disappointing. You might feel foolish for believing that something was going to change. This is normal. But remember, silence is also an answer. It might mean that humanity is not ready yet. It might mean that the others are waiting for us to grow up a little more. In this scenario, our job is to keep studying, keep asking questions, and not lose hope. Scenario 2, the soft rain. This is the most likely scenario. Instead of a giant spaceship landing on the lawn of the White House, we get small pieces of the truth. Maybe a government releases a new video that is very clear and cannot be denied. Maybe scientists announce that they have found a radio signal from a star system 100 light years away. It will not be a sudden shock, but a slow realization. It is like a soft rain that eventually soaks everything. In this world, the skeptics will slowly become believers. The change will happen step by step. Scenario 3, the sudden storm. This is the scenario that movies are made of. We receive undeniable proof. This could be a mass sighting seen by millions of people at the same time. It could be a direct communication that interrupts our internet and television. If this happens, the world will change in one single day. The stock markets might freeze, schools might close, religions will have to look at their holy books with new eyes. This is the scenario that requires the most mental strength. The shock of the new reality. If the truth comes out that we are not alone, and that we have never been alone, it will cause what psychologists call ontological shock. This is a fancy term for having your entire view of reality broken. Imagine you have lived your whole life in a room with no windows. You believe the room is the whole universe. Then one day someone knocks down a wall and you see a forest, a river, and a sun outside. It is beautiful, but it is also terrifying. You might feel dizzy, you might feel small, you might feel angry that no one told you about the outside world sooner. To prepare for this, you must practice being flexible. You must tell yourself, my understanding of the world is just a small map, not the whole territory. If the map needs to change, let it change. Do not hold on to old ideas just because they feel safe. Safety is comforting, but truth is necessary. The anchor of healthy skepticism. While we keep our minds open, we must also keep our feet on the ground. In the coming months, there will be many rumors. There will be fake videos created by computers. There will be people who claim to be messengers from the stars, but who only want your money or your obedience. You need a shield. That shield is healthy skepticism. Being a skeptic does not mean you deny everything. It means you demand quality evidence. If you see a video of a flying saucer, ask questions. Who filmed it? Where is the original file? Could it be a drone? Could it be a reflection? Do not let your desire for the truth make you blind to deception. There are people who will try to take advantage of your excitement. They might start cults or sell fake protection devices. Stay away from fear. If a message makes you feel panicked, afraid, or tells you that you are special and everyone else is doomed, be very careful. That is usually a human trick, not a cosmic truth. Real wisdom usually brings peace, not terror. Maintaining your daily life. The most important advice for the horizon of contact is this: chop wood, carry water. This is an old saying that means you must continue with your daily life. Even if we make contact with a civilization that is 1 million years older than us, you still need to eat breakfast. You still need to brush your teeth. You still need to hug your children and go to work. Do not let the search for the unknown destroy the known. Your life here on Earth with your family and friends is precious. The aliens or the visitors or the intelligence, whatever they are interesting, but they are not more important than the love you share with the people around you. If the news breaks tomorrow that beings from another dimension are here, take a deep breath. Look at your hands, look at the trees. Ground yourself in the present moment. The world is still spinning, gravity is still holding you down, you are safe. Conclusion: the dawn. As we look toward December and then toward March 2026, let us stand together. We are not just individuals looking at the sky, we are a human family. If the horizon remains empty, we will keep watching. If the horizon fills with ships, we will stand tall to meet them. We will not greet the future with fear, we will greet it with curiosity, with caution, and with a calm heart. The universe is vast, measuring billions of light years across. It is filled with energy and matter and mysteries we have not yet named. But the greatest mystery is the human ability to adapt, to learn, and to expand our minds to fit a larger reality. Stay awake, stay calm, and keep watching the horizon. Now we have reached the end of our long journey. We have travelled further than any ship, further than any satellite, and further than any beam of light. We have floated through the darkness and danced with the light. Now it is time to rest. It is time to come home. Take a deep breath in, feel the air filling your lungs, and let it out slowly. With every breath, let the images of the galaxy settle in your mind like soft snow falling on a quiet mountain. Think back to where we started. We moved past our moon grey and silent. We drifted past the giant planets with their rings of ice and dust. We flew out of our solar system, leaving the warmth of our sun behind. We saw stars that were blue and hot, and stars that were red and cool. We saw the clouds of gas where new stars are born, looking like nurseries of light. We even dared to look at the black holes, those mysterious giants that hold the galaxy together. It was a long trip, but now as you lie in your bed safe and warm, think about what all of that vastness truly means. We called this part the cosmic mirror for a reason. When you look into a mirror, you see your face, you see your eyes, your skin, and your smile. But when you look up at the night sky, you're also looking at a mirror. It is a different kind of mirror, but it reflects something very deep and very true about who you are. Science tells us a beautiful story. It tells us that billions of years ago, the universe was just a sea of energy. Then the first stars turned on. Inside those stars, it was incredibly hot, millions of degrees hot. In that heat, the stars were busy cooking. They were smashing little atoms together to make bigger atoms. They made carbon, they made oxygen, they made argon and nitrogen. When those stars grew old and tired, they exploded. They sent all those new atoms flying out into the darkness. Those atoms floated for millions of years. Eventually, they came together to form a new star, our sun. They came together to form a blue planet, our Earth. And most importantly, they came together to form you. This is the secret of the cosmic mirror. The carbon in your muscles, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in your breath, and the calcium in your bones, all of it was made inside a star that died long ago. You are not a stranger in this universe. You're not an alien visiting from somewhere else. You're a child of the universe. You're made of the exact same things as the galaxies we just explored. As you relax your shoulders and let your legs feel heavy, let this thought comfort you. You belong here. You fit perfectly into this grand design. Sometimes the universe can feel too big. It can feel empty and cold. The distances are so huge that we cannot even imagine them. We talk about millions of light years. We talk about billions of galaxies. It is easy to feel small. It is easy to feel lonely. But you are never truly alone. Think about the air you are breathing right now. That air connects you to the sky. The gravity that pulls you gently down into your mattress is the same gravity that holds the moon in orbit around the Earth. It is the same gravity that holds the Earth near the sun. It is an invisible hand holding you, keeping you safe, keeping you connected to everything else. Even in the deepest silence of space, there is connection. The light from a star that is 1,000 years away is touching your eyes tonight. That star is saying hello from the past. It is sending its energy across the ocean of time just to reach you. So when you close your eyes, do not imagine a dark, empty void. Imagine a web of light. Imagine that you are a part of a giant breathing organism. The universe is not out there far away. The universe is in you. Let yourself drift deeper now. The journey is over and your body is ready to sleep. Imagine that the night sky is a heavy, soft blanket. It is made of velvet darkness stitched with threads of silver starlight. Imagine pulling that blanket up over your shoulders. It is cool and comforting. Under this blanket there is no noise, there is no rush, there is only peace. The stars are like the city lights of a distant kingdom watching over you. They have burned for billions of years and they will burn for billions more. They are patient, they do not hurry. And tonight you do not need to hurry either. Feel the rhythm of your breathing, in and out. It is like the tide of the ocean. It is like the slow rotation of a galaxy. Everything in the universe has a rhythm. The planets spin, the stars orbit, the seasons change. Your heart beats. You are part of this slow, eternal dance. You can let go now. You don't need to understand the math or the physics. You don't need to know the names of the constellations or the distance to the nearest nebula. You only need to feel the wonder. Let the wonder turn into a dream. Imagine you are floating on a quiet lake. The water is still. The sky above is full of stars. The reflection of the stars is in the water, so you are floating between two skies. One above and one below. You are weightless. You are drifting. The mysteries of the cosmos are safe to leave behind for tonight. The black holes will keep spinning. The comets will keep flying. The nebulas will keep glowing softly in the dark. They will all be there when you wake up. But for now, their job is just to be a lullaby. A silent song of light singing you to sleep. You are not a tiny speck lost in the dark. You are a piece of the stardust that has learned to dream. You are the universe experiencing itself. And right now, the universe is tired. The universe wants to rest. Feel your eyelids getting heavier. They feel so pleasant and heavy, like they are sealed with sleep. Your arms are resting by your sides. Your legs are sinking into the softness of the bed. The tension is leaving your body, flowing out of your fingers and toes, evaporating into the night air. There is nothing left to do. There is nowhere left to go. You have seen the edges of creation and you have returned safely to the center. The center is here. The center is now. The center is this peaceful moment of sleep. The cosmic mirror reflects peace. It reflects stillness. It reflects a deep, ancient silence that wraps around you like a warm hug. Good night to the red planet Mars. Good night to the ringed giant Saturn. Good night to the spiraling Milky Way. Good night to the billions of suns watching from far away. And good night to you, the traveler. You are home. You are safe. You are loved by the stars. Drift away now. Float into the velvet night. Deep, deep sleep. Rest now. Silence. Peace. Sleep.